another edition of Handicap Born Black in America. I'm your host, Ramon Roan. This is being brought to you by Concerned Citizens Alliance of North Charleston. We are an organization. Our mission is to bring economic empowerment, give voting rights to those who cannot vote, and we're also seeking to get justice in our political, economic, and our justice system. Now, today's topic is entitled Racism, Stephen A. Smith and Black Elites. Before I go on to this, I like Stephen A. Smith. He brings it when he's on the radio as well as on television. He brings it to some. I believe that at least up until this point, I thought that he represents our people well, and he still does. I think he's in error on this one here. Monday night, ESPN's Stephen A. Smith was invited to give a talk on legacy, history, and the impact of the African American athlete at the University of South Alabama. The talk was scheduled as part of the university program offering during Black History Month. Part of Stephen's talk was specifically addressed to young black students and attendees in the crowd. According to WKRG report, Smith wanted them to know that racism is not an excuse for a lack of progress in their lives because it does not exist for them. Let me quote, "Racism doesn't exist. Obviously, I'm lying. Of course it exists, but not for you. You see, you don't have to go to the back of the bus. You're not denied the opportunity to eat at restaurants or to enter nightclubs or patronize businesses. You have the right to vote. You are not being lynched. You're not being hung. You're not going through the trials and tribulations your ancestors, recent and far beyond recent, endured, so you can sit here today." End of quote. Now, I'm going to stop there. Stephen A. Smith is in error. And because racism still exists today for our young people. Now, I know myself, as well as 18 or rather 200 more who have been going through a discrimination lawsuit for 17 long years, racism exists. Oh, yeah, I'm 53, but what about the 18, 19-year-old kid that is in college? Well, it exists for them too. You look at the employment rates of college graduates, white and blacks. See, because it is much tougher for the African American child to get a job after graduating college, as compared to the white college graduate. Oh, let's look at the racism doesn't exist. Now, do you think the fact that the top 5% of blacks have, on average, have $350,000 in assets? That's it. The top 5% have $350,000 or more in assets. That's it. 300. Whereas for white people is $1.3 million in assets, and that's for the top 10%. Okay, racism doesn't exist. When you're looking at the poverty rate in the African American community at 28%, when 1 out of every 3 children, 1 out of every 3, that's 33%, are living in poverty. Those are children, okay? When we're looking at our HBCUs, when they are hurting for money, they don't have the money as your big universities such as South Carolina State or the University of Alabama. They don't have that money. So racism doesn't exist. That's maybe also why those kids are able to afford going to a college such as HBCU. They need those funding mechanisms so they can get a great education. And I say great education because our historically black colleges, they do give some world-class education. I know this for a fact. But the larger problem is that Stephen A. Smith, maybe, this is my opinion, maybe Stephen A. Smith may be out of touch with the reality. Look, this Black Lives Matter movement, it's not made up. A black 18-year-old male has a greater chance, almost like a 8 times more likelihood to being stopped by a police officer than a white child. They have a more problem. They will be more suspected of selling drugs, even though their whites sell just as much drugs as blacks. You have a much more being racially profiled because you're black. Now, why would you think that because they're being lynched? Really, we're not being lynched. There's not really much lynching going on. Not when cops can actually shoot you down, shoot you in the streets. That's when the Walter Scott family, for example. Okay, so using the lynchings to say that you're not being discriminated against, or racism doesn't exist, it would be unfair. Look, from 1880 to 1968, there are 4,742 lynchings in America. That was recorded lynchings. However, 35% of those lynchings, those were lynched, were white people. Yeah, they were white people that were being lynched too. So you can't use just the lynching or even getting on the back of the bus. What happens when you are when Daquan is applying for a job versus Jason Owens, Daquan Brown or Daquan Washington? When they see his application, they're going to say, oh, he's black. They'll get the job. Name recognition, that's it. Hey, that Daquan, most likely, but I have never met a white man with the name of Daquan or Shaheed. Haven't happened. So when Stephen A. Smith, and along with others, because there's a lot of black elites, they since they're in Hollywood, they're making millions. They don't find a problem with it. There's no racism. Racism doesn't exist for them. For Stephen A. Smith, racism may not exist for Stephen A. Smith. But what about those that had traveled the road prior to, paving the way for Stephen A.? They made a rule. They made room for him. Stephen A. is going to make room for young black journalists to come behind him. But racism exists, and it's always going to exist in this country. It's always going to exist until blacks become, or whites become, the minority. It's going to happen. It's not going to step, because as long as whites are in power, there's going to always be racism. Racism in our justice system, in our politics, racism in our economic system. There's always going to be racism. So to tell these kids, I always believe it exists, but we need to give our kids the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Let them know the reality of the world, the country that they're living in. That's what we should be telling these kids. You should be telling these kids, yeah, racism that exists, but I'm going to prepare you. I'm going to tell you the truth, and then I'm going to prepare you to deal with it. That's what Stephen A. Smith should tell them. Kids, racism exists, but guess what? I'm going to give you the weapons to defeat it. I believe the weapon to defeating racism is total economic independence. We need, instead of creating employees, we need to create business owners. That's what we should be doing, Stephen A. Now, like I said, I believe that Stephen A. Smith is in error, along with some other celebrities who have been detached. Stephen A. Smith, he's a millionaire. He's got $1 million contract with Sirius and probably ESPN. But he's an error on this here. Racism exists, and we need to tell our young people, and we need to prepare our young people to live in this world. That is our job as elders in our communities, prepare our young people for manhood and womanhood, and we're doing it a disservice when they feed them a pack of lies such as racism don't exist. I'm your host, Ramon Roan. This has been another edition of Handicap Born Black in America. Stay true.